Another look, another lie, another dream, I kiss goodbye. Another night I spend alone, sitting and waiting for no one to show. Just hoping my dream will come true. My dream will come true this time. Another look, another lie, another dream, I kiss goodbye. Day after day, I scream inside for all the times I never tried. But I don't regret a single dream, 'cause everyone felt so real to me. Be used as a crutch. Sometimes when they're spoken too much. But I won't stop dreaming, though these dreams may change. I know that real love will find me one of these days. I live for dreams, but this one's gone, and so it seems that it's time to move on. Another look, another lie, another love, another night, another dream slowly dies, another dream that I kiss goodbye.
Pennies in a stream, falling leaves, a sycamore, moonlight in Vermont, icy finger waves, ski trails on a mountainside, snowlight in Vermont, telegraph cables that zing down the highway and travel each bend in the road. People who meet in this romantic setting are so hypnotized by the lovely evening summer breeze, warbling of a meadowlark, moonlight in Vermont.
Look at the stars. Look at the stars. Oh, these hills are green and strong, and the river's deep and long. When the water runs, it fills our hearts with love. Though these times are so unknown, and you may feel like you're alone, when the path you know is dark and cold, we are there to bring you home. We'll bring you home. Whenever you need it, just look around. You know you can feel it. Love is all around. And when you are feeling so down, look at the stars. Look at the stars. Through hardships and triumphs we have come out strong. This feeling of hope, it keeps us going on. 5 golden angels keep us safe from harm. Our lives will be written into history. The family we've built in this community. Lord knows how far we've come from where we started. Never parted. No. Whenever you need it, just look around. You know you can feel it. Love is all around. And when you are feeling so down, look at the stars. Look at the stars.
These days you might need a bit of a lift. Me, I just hit up my boys in the grift. And maybe set up a Zoom. We could write some tunes, so we could just laugh our asses off. Top, the glasses off. Got a special bottle and it's time to pop the top. We got one more bottle of hops a lot, and it feels like the world stopped the clock. We keep our social distance, but there's so much we're missing. You're jonesing to reopen. Hold up, hold on. Stay home, drink beer instead. Who knew that hops could stop the spread? Stay home, drink beer instead. Who knew that hops could stop the spread? We got to do our part. Sipping on sunshine. Now 5 o'clock in the age of COVID, FaceTime wine and my wife's were loaded. Eating well in quarantine, we're all gonna gain the COVID-19. Make another meal of rice and beanies, then it's on to quarantines. Book club, poker night, cards against. I never get to see so much of my friends. We keep our social distance, but the calendar is packed. Zoom to Zoom to Zoom, back to back to back. Stay home, drink beer
Hello, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the music. We had some great music there from some local bands. We had Jeremy and Eliza Hill, Grace Potter sang a song that Lee wrote the lyrics to, the Holter Kids, and that great dance band, The Grift. Hey, Jess.
Hi, Doug. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Everyone out there in webinar land, YouTube land, and Mad River TV, thanks for joining us here to the first ever Mad River Story Slam. And hey, Jess, do you know why I know it's the first ever?
No.
Well, because we made up the name, so it's got to be the first ever.
Okay.
So mine.
Oh,
yeah, I know. So my name's Doug Bergstein, and I am a board member with the Valley Players Theater. We are your local community theater, and we have been bringing you live entertainment since 1979. Over to you, Jess.
Oh, thank you, Doug. I am Jess Tompkins of Share MRV. Share MRV is a new local nonprofit. We are focused on food justice, food sustainability, and insecurities. But just go over to sharemrv.org and you can find out more about us there. Tonight, we should just focus on the storytellers.
Excellent. And speaking of stories, the theme for the evening, we're all here to listen to and tell stories about the unexpected. And a shout out to Barb Garvin for coming up with that theme idea. Thanks, Barb.
Thanks, Barb.
All the stories that you are going to hear tonight are true and told from the point of view of the storyteller. For those familiar with moth stories, this is not an official moth event, but for those familiar with that, the Story Slam tonight, it's curated, which means we have already chosen our storytellers. In fact, we have been meeting over the last couple weeks, been workshopping the stories, and we're ready to go tonight, eh?
We are ready to go. I'm so excited. First of all, I love stories. I love the moth, although this isn't a moth. It was where the idea came from. And God, like I said, we have some great stories, but I think what's so beautiful about stories are they're just universal. They have this unique ability to help us understand ourselves better and find commonality with others. So through these stories, we share joys, we share fears, passions, laughter, sadness, and hardship. And some of those things you'll be experiencing tonight.
Mm-hmm.
But we also want to send out a huge thank you to Susan Schmidt. Sue is a stand-up comic storyteller, a Moth Story Slam winner, host, and regional producer. She spent so much time with us helping us organize the event. She just imparted her wisdom on storytelling to us and to all the storytellers tonight. So just thanks, Sue. You are amazing. And if you're here watching, yeah, we just thank you.
So this evening, while it is full of storytelling, it's also a fundraiser. And there is, Ruth Ann has been putting a link in the chat for those who are in the webinar. For those who are watching on Mad River TV or on YouTube, you could go to the Valley Players website and there's a link to our PayPal account. And we're going to share all the donations that come in tonight between Share MRV, because sharing is caring, between Share MRV and the Valley Players Theater. I don't know if any of you have been listening to like Wait, Don't Tell Me is a great example where they have these fake audiences who do their applause. Well, we got our own fake audience. So you're going to, even though I'm sure you're going to be clapping at home, we have a fake audience that will come on and welcome our storytellers and applaud for you loudly at the end of their story. So you don't need to worry about it. We've taken care of it for you.
And then for those folks who are watching at home or watching on the webinar, if were able to get in, you were given a link to a Google form. So, oh, Sue Schmidt Turner. Sue Schmidt's here. Oh, snow! Yay! Okay, sorry. I'll go back. So again, you were sent a link in the Google form. You can go to that now and open it up. So while you're listening to the stories, you can rate, we're not looking for the best. We're just looking for your favorite. Does something move you? Does something make you laugh? Something resonate with you? And there will be a scoring at the end of the performances.
Right, and we'll carve out some time for you at the end, so you don't need to panic. Like, when do I have to get this in? We'll carve out time for you to make sure that happens, and we'll remind you. So we're almost there, right? We're almost ready to go. So before the evening, during our workshops, we asked everyone what their favorite or weirdest late night snack might be, and we're going to include their response as part of their introduction. So you are, I don't know if you've noticed, but you are able to chat, and we would appreciate it, especially the storytellers who are focused on telling their stories, if you would hold your chats until between the stories. When Jess and I are talking, you can chat all you want because we don't get distracted, right? So hold your chats until between the stories and at intermission. Okay, at the end of the show, stick around. We'll do some final bows, and then we're going to stick around and do a talk back. So if you want to talk to the storytellers, ask a question about any of the stories, you'll have that opportunity. And there will be a 5-minute intermission. So just if you could hold on until then, after the 5th story. So we have 9 full stories for you tonight. So after the 5th story, there will be a 5-minute intermission.
Get yourself a beer, another beer, glass of wine. But hey, Doug, I think it's time to begin.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm ready. All right. Our first storyteller of the evening is a gentleman named Mark Wilson of Waitsfield. Mark is the new pastor at the Waitsfield United Church of Christ. Welcome to our community, Mark. He enjoys reading, telling stories in worship, particularly children's books. His favorite late night snack is a glass of whole milk and a piece of day-old cold pepperoni pizza.
Yum.
Yum. Come on in, Mark. Welcome.
It is a privilege to be the one people call on the worst day of their lives. In 2009, I was the pastor of the Phippsburg Congregational Church in Phippsburg, Maine, a classic white clapboard Yankee church perched on a small hill at the edge of the Kennebec River. Billion-dollar high-tech warships built just upstream at the Bath Iron Works still used the 219-year-old steeple as a navigational aid. But the church was more than a quaint antique. It was a place where a diverse community of people gathered, worshipped, and shared their lives. Two of those people, two people who couldn't have been less alike, were Don and Mary. While serving in the military, Don had suffered a stroke from which he had never fully recovered. He was disabled, used a motorized scooter, and lived on Social Security disability income. Money was tight. So when Mary got up in worship one morning to announce that she was part of a group that spayed or neutered cats for free, Don took notice. You see, Don owned 2 cats, a male named Mr. Pickles and a female named Jubilee. A word about Mary. Mary possessed one of those oversized personalities that was fed by a bottomless source of energy. If you received a card from Mary, chances are there were doodles all over the front of the envelope and colored pictures on the inside. And if you were close to her, and I was, you often got the confetti treatment as well. Mary wrote emails where every letter was a different color and a different font. As the wife of a retired banker, Mary lived a comfortable but generous life. And so how do I fit in here? As a small church pastor, I was often the conduit between people like Mary and Don, the wire the current went through without being amped up or going to ground. Practically speaking, few people wanted Don to have their phone number because he was famous for calling when the mood struck him, often at 5:30 in the morning. Mary didn't have to take those calls. And sometimes I didn't either. But when I could, I did. I was his pastor. This is what you sign up for. Early on in my ministry, I resented it, but then I learned to see what a gift it is to mean something to people, to occupy the role that I do in their lives. When you sign on to wear the collar, you understand this means you won't be the one holding the leash. Anyway, after worship that day, Dawn and Mary connected around the free spay and neuter clinic, and on the appointed day, Mary stopped by Dawn's apartment to pick up the cat. Dawn wasn't around, so Mary scooped up the cat, which is a much more dangerous process than that simple phrase makes it out to be. And she headed south, where the operation was to take place. About an hour later, I received a call from Dawn. Now, because of his stroke, when Dawn was agitated, his speech tended to be quick or slur a little. Between that and my hearing loss, it was often hard for me to understand Dawn under the best of circumstances. "She got the wrong cat," Dawn said. "What?" I said. "She got the wrong cat." "Dawn," I said, slow down, I can't hear you. Try again." "She got the wrong cat." It turned out that Dawn had neglected to tell Mary that he had 2 cats. Arriving at his apartment, she saw a cat and thought reasonably enough it was the right one. It wasn't. She had scooped up Jubilee, the female, to be spayed, when it was Mr. Pickles, the male, who needed to be neutered, and who smartly had made himself scarce when Mary arrived. "Okay, Dawn," I said, "I'll call Mary." "Yeah, and by the way, Mark," he said, "those vets are going to be in for a surprise." "What do you mean, Dawn?" "Jubilee has already been spayed." So I took a deep breath and I called Mary on her cell phone. "Hi, Mary. It's Mark. Dawn said you came for his cat." "Yes," she said. Where are you?" I asked gingerly. "On the highway." "Oh, great. Phew," I answered. "There's still time." "Time for what?" Mary said. Mary, this is a little awkward, but Dawn didn't tell you we had 2 cats. You took a female." "Yes." "Yeah, so actually it was a male cat that he had that needed to be neutered." "You took the wrong cat, Mary." The next thing I heard was an expletive, and it was a colorful one, befitting the talents of a woman who wrote emails with words in different colors and in different fonts. And after that I heard her cell phone being dropped and the brakes of Mary's car locking up at 65 miles an hour. As I found out later, Mary was indeed on the highway, but she was on her way home. She had already dropped off Jubilee at the vet's office. When she found out she had brought the wrong cat to the clinic, she slammed on the brakes, turned around in one of those authorized vehicle-only places on the highway, and sped back. She pulled up to the vet's office, put the car in park, left the engine running, left the car door open, ran into the vet's office, ran past the receptionist with the jaw dropped, searching the exam rooms until she found the room where the vet was, and there, under a little white sheet, was Jubilee, who was just then preparing to go under the knife and no doubt thinking somewhere in her little kitty brain, "I thought I'd already done this." "Put down that knife," Mary said, her words conveying all of their different colors and different fonts, and the vet, not used to being intruded upon in her own exam room, complied immediately, giving Mary time to blurt out the whole story of how she had taken the wrong cat and how the poor cat there on the table under the sheet had already been spayed. Jubilee, now saved, was allowed to leave with Mary, although you might say she did so reluctantly. Mary returned her back to Dawn, and with some strong words and no small amount of laughter, and treats for Jubilee for all she had suffered, all was well. And so one might say that Jubilee lived up to her name that day, being spared her second spaying. But one might also say that it was Mr. Pickles' Jubilee as well.
Oh, Mark, that was so great. Jubilee. Oh, phew. I can just imagine her running through and stopping the surgery. Okay, so onward bound. Next up, we have from Waitsfield, living in a little cabin overlooking the spine of the Green Mountains, we have Siobhan Travers. Siobhan is counting down the days until she can begin her cycling journey across the country or continent. I believe that starts in June. Though she's not much of a late night snacker, on special occasions, her favorite is salted popcorn mixed with peanut M&Ms. One of mine also. And here you are. Here is Siobhan.
When I was 8 years old, I had a royal blue Schwinn bicycle that I loved riding all over my neighborhood. I lived in the perfect development. It had steep downhills, good uphill climbs. It circled around, and there was barely any traffic. On good weather evenings after dinner, my friends and I would all congregate in my front yard and go racing our bicycles. On one particular summer evening, my grandmother had volunteered to watch my sisters and me. My parents were going to a bridge league banquet, and none of our regular sitters were available. I thought it was very brave of my grandmother to take this on, given that she'd never attempted to deal with an 8-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 2-year-old. Before my parents left, they said, "Whatever your grandmother tells you to do so. Listen to her. No questions asked." Well, after dinner, I wanted to ride my bicycle as usual with my friends. When I asked my grandmother's permission to do so, she said, "Absolutely not." Oh, that didn't sit well with me. And so I charged out regardless. And I jumped on my bicycle, and whew, in a flash, I was flat out on the pavement. My hands were scraped up, my knees were bloody, and my mouth was bleeding. I tore back into the house to see what damage had occurred in my mouth, and there I found that I had injured my 2 fairly new adult front teeth. One had a good-sized chip in it, and the other one had tiny little fracture lines. I was mortified, and I spent the rest of the night in my room, knowing full well that while my knees and my hands would recover, that chip tooth would not grow back. It's 15 years later, and I'm running all about trying to get everything crossed off on my list. It's a fall, warm, sunny Friday afternoon in Morgantown, West Virginia, and I'm getting married in 24 hours. I'm nervous, I'm excited, and I want everything to be perfect, as most brides-to-be do. My fiance, Jim, and I have chosen a venue that's 2.5 hours away. We get in the car and we start driving. About an hour in, I see a sign for a farmer's market. Up ahead, we stop. The apples are strikingly gorgeous. I'm drooling over these apples. We buy several, we get back in our vehicle, and because they look so irresistible, I pick up one of the apples, take a nice good bite out of it, and oh no, oh hell no. One of my front teeth is now within the confines of the apple. Oh. Jim takes one look at me and that hole in my mouth and says rather seriously, "Well, I'm certainly not marrying you now." I burst into tears. What can I possibly do now to solve this disaster that I never saw coming? And then faintly in my head, I hear my grandmother's voice, and she's chuckling. "Remember when you were 8 and you didn't listen to me? Well, I know you eventually had that chipped tooth crowned, but that other tooth, that one that never gave you any problems, that one that's in the apple right now, well, you thought you'd gotten away pretty scot-free, but no, I've been waiting for the very right time for your consequence, and it's now." Oh. Jim turns the car around and we dash back to Morgantown. It's now 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, and we have no idea where to find a dentist or if we can find one. We drive to the local clinic. It's open. It's still packed inside. While I'm waiting, Jim disappears, and I start to panic all over again. Did he just leave me in a dental clinic? About 10 minutes later, he returns. Grab your stuff, he says. We're leaving. And he tells me he's been at a payphone for the last 10 minutes with the yellow pages, calling dentist after dentist after dentist in Morgantown. And what he's discovered is dentists in Morgantown go golfing on Fridays. There's nobody around. But luckily, he has found one woman who answered the phone at a dental office. And she says, I will try to find my dentist. Come on over. Dr. Funderburg and I arrive at his office at the same time. He's in his running shoes, his blue jeans, and his t-shirt, and he's all charged up. He says, as he ushers me into the dental chair, thank goodness you got me out of doing the vacuuming. And as I sit there and watch intensely, Dr. Funderburg takes a paper clip, cuts a piece of it, takes my tooth now in his hand, puts some cement on it with the paper clip, puts it back into that big hole in my mouth with more cement, holds it there for a few minutes, and then says, there you go, you're all set. Oh, I'm ecstatic. Dr. Funderburg has saved my marriage, or at the very least, my wedding. I am starting to breathe easier. Everything's going to be okay. When he adds, now, you're going to want to keep your mouth closed as much as possible. And whatever you do, do not do a lot of kissing. That tooth could easily come back out. I sheepishly nod in agreement. I will do whatever it takes to keep that damn paperclip tooth in my mouth during my wedding. And then he hands me a little tiny tube of cement and says, keep this with you at all times. We thank him profusely and dash out the door. 24 hours later, I'm saying my vows while one of my sisters stands next to me with her bouquet of dried flowers and that tiny tube of cement right in her hand. Remembering Dr. Funderburg's words, I do my best to keep my mouth closed. Even when the minister says, you may now kiss the bride, there's no deep, passionate kissing for this new bride. Oh no. And the tooth stays in place throughout all the festivities. When I get the wedding photos back, I note that in most of them, my mouth is closed, but I've also puckered my lips up like a fish. Oh, what a horrendous event. My grandmother had passed on before my wedding, but I finally got the message. It's of utmost importance to listen to one's grandmother. A lifetime later, I'm now a grandmother. My grandchildren call me Chevy. My oldest granddaughter, Sylvie, she's 7, and she reminds me a lot of myself at that age. She loves rollerblading and riding her bicycle all over the neighborhood. And she doesn't much care for authority, mine included. When I'm in charge of Sylvie and I say, Sylvie, put on that helmet before you ride that bicycle, or put on shoes before you get on that bike. Sylvie's usual response is, no, Chevy, it's fine. It will be fine. All of my childhood memories come rushing back to the surface, and I get choked up. I desperately want to tell her that sometimes bad things happen when you don't listen to your grandmother. But how can I possibly do so and expect her to understand? Thank you.
Well, Chevy, grandkids have a way of shining that mirror right back at us, don't they? That has got to be one of the more unique pre-wedding stories I've ever heard. Thanks for sharing that with us. Okay, our next storyteller, Erica Nichols Fraser, is a writer, editor, reader who aims to spend her days immersed in books. She's the editor of A Tether to This World, an anthology of mental health recovery stories coming out in May. She lives in Waitsfield with her husband, dogs, cat, and chickens. Her weirdest late night snack is Triscuits with melted Cabot Hunter's extra sharp cheddar, sometimes with a little mustard. Welcome, Erica. Erica, you're going to want to unmute yourself.
Sorry about that, Doug. When I was 26, I didn't know if I ever wanted to have kids, but I knew I didn't want to have kids then. I was engaged, working at a small nonprofit, not making a ton of money, and living in a house in Starksboro that had started out as a deer camp and had a few rooms tacked on with no doors, and the whole thing kind of shook when the wind blew. So not somewhere we wanted to start a family. So I'd had an intrauterine device, or an IUD, implanted, which was the most effective form of birth control out there, more than 99% effective, they all say. But that 1% is someone. I was at a conference when nausea suddenly swept over me and I clenched my stomach and felt like I was going to be sick. I had what I thought were just the worst cramps that I'd ever experienced, along with heavy bleeding, both of which are unusual for an IUD, for over a week. So I made an appointment with my OBGYN and I said, no, it's not an emergency, thinking women have dealt with pain far worse than this. Now, I come from tough women. My mother, I don't think, has ever taken a sick day in her life. And even when she broke her wrist, it was all, oh, it's fine, no big deal. I once broke my arm snowboarding and it took me 2 days to go to the hospital, during which time I kept snowboarding. So I knew how to handle pain. Now, about a week before the OBGYN appointment, I was at work on the phone with a board member when my vision suddenly went blurry and I got dizzy and I had to get off the phone as soon as I could. I rushed to my boss's office to lie down and I collapsed, almost hit my head on her desk, had to push away from it. I hit the floor and passed out for a few seconds, then I had to rush to go to the bathroom to throw up. For days I was dizzy, had to sit down after just a few seconds of standing. The pain was excruciating and I thought I had some sort of strange stomach bug and possibly vertigo on top of these unmerciless cramps. Finally, it was the OBGYN appointment and the doctor told me that with these symptoms, they have to test for pregnancy, just to be sure, but with an IUD that was extremely rare and I had nothing to worry about. Surprise, I was that 1%. Her first pregnancy was an IUD, my doctor told me. So I should be happy for her. So she told me we had to take an ultrasound to determine what was happening and whether the fetus was viable. But they were scheduling 8 weeks out, 8 weeks of not knowing what was happening in my body, whether I was pregnant, whether I had to make difficult decisions and I didn't feel prepared to make. I called my fiance from the parking garage where I was just going around in circles and circles, trying to look for the exit, just sobbing, distraught. I wanted to be alone in my body. I wanted to be in control, and I wanted to absolve myself from this incredible pain. Thankfully, they got me in the next day for an ultrasound, and the technician couldn't quite tell what was going on, so she called in a doctor who called in another, and pretty soon I was surrounded by doctors poking at me, who ultimately determined that I had an ectopic pregnancy in my left fallopian tube, which is when an embryo implants itself outside of the uterus. And in no situation is that viable. That can never turn into a baby. And despite what some Ohio lawmakers believed, that ectopic embryo cannot be reimplanted in the uterus. That's not a thing. So they said I needed surgery that day. that it was too late for medication. 13 hours later, my fiance and I had been waiting all day in the ER, watching the tiny little TV. Doctors kept coming in and nurses and asking me if I needed anything, giving me more blankets. And finally I said, unless they can get me in right now, I have enough blankets. They told me that an elderly gentleman was the top priority and they'd get me in as soon as they could. But 13 hours later, it was after midnight when they finally wheeled me in. And I woke up some 5 hours later next to my fiance holding out a ginger ale for me. After some monitoring, we were able to go home. And the next day, the surgeon called me to apologize, or it seemed to me really to cover his butt. He said, now I've been told that ectopic pregnancy is like a ticking time bomb, but they didn't know it had already gone off. He told me that my fallopian tube had ruptured a week before, that I'd been bleeding internally a lot, that blood had been pouring into my stomach for days. They should have rushed me in the moment it happened, much less a week and some 13 hours later. He told me I could have died. He said I was lucky, but he said it like it was my fault. He told me this is the problem with patient pain scales, that I had told them I was only at about a 4 at that moment. Well, compared to the past 3 weeks of pain, sure. He told me he would have thought that anyone with a ruptured fallopian tube would be writhing on the floor in pain, and that I really should have made it clearer to them sooner how much danger I was in. Now I am lucky. I was extremely lucky, and not only did I survive, they didn't have to remove an ovary. I did have to sign a little waiver saying they could if they had to, but they didn't. And my chances of getting pregnant, should I choose to do so, are not significantly impacted by having just one fallopian tube now. Finally, that physical pain was relieved somewhat, but the emotional pain stayed. The grief and loss and depression I felt for months and even years afterwards, which I felt was really exacerbated by that doctor calling me and making me feel like it was my responsibility what had happened to my body. He said it as if he has any idea of the pain a woman can bear. Thank you.
Thank you, Erica, for sharing that story with us. It is very personal and very powerful. And yes, pain is what a patient says it is, always. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so next up we have Rachel Wiley. 2 years ago, Rachel left the perpetually sunny beaches of California to move to the hills of Vermont. When she isn't busy compulsively creating with food, fiber, or any other material she can get her hands on, she can be found deep in the forest foraging and letting her inner woodland nymph out to play. A favorite late night snack of this wonderful woman is a tie between a handful of dry cereal and sliced apples with peanut butter. Welcome, Rachel.
I was born into an old Italian family, but let me clarify what I mean by old. I mean, not the type of old, like there's 10 generations of my family's name in the headstones in the local cemetery. I mean old like my mom was 42 and my dad was 46 when I was born. I mean old like when my mom let her beautiful hair turn gray and came to pick me up from middle school one day. And one of my friends I was standing with said, "Oh, your grandma's here to get you." That kind of old. Being a child of an old Italian family, like that kind of old Italian, it didn't take long into my middle and high school years to understand that that meant there was limited time on this earth with all of my family. So it became important, almost urgent, for me to pay close attention, as much as a teenager can pay attention, to the stories and the wisdoms that my family had to share at all of our family dinners. Now, my grandpa, my mom's dad, he was one of the ones who really brought the Italian to our Italian family. He was expressive as nobody's business, talking with his hands almost as much as he talked with his mouth. And he was a dentist and an actor. And so from 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, he had a captive audience. And then after work, he would go to the local theater and have yet another captive audience. He was such a big personality. He even released his own cassette tape called The Singing Dentist, and it was distributed widely in our community. So I was going to visit my grandpa this past March 8th, and I was driving with the windows rolled down through the desert in Arizona. I was cruising, enjoying the beautiful, beautiful landscape, winding through these red rock canyon roads. And I was driving for hours and hours watching the sun lower towards the horizon. And by the time I got to my grandpa's, all I really wanted to do was take a shower and go to bed. But when he opened the door and was so excited to see me, I decided that the shower can wait. He can deal with my stink. And I threw myself on the couch in his living room. And he settled on the floor next to me, and we were just catching up a little bit here and there. And at some point, something reminded him of a story from his childhood. And he started to tell it. It was a conversation between his sister Josephine and his mother, who I never really heard much about. And so I was paying attention, but after driving for many hours, I was paying attention like I did when I was a teenager, so not that much. But I was really loving and struck by his performance of it. And I was soaking that up. And he was getting really into it. And all of a sudden he stopped and looked at his watch. And it was the kind of watch that has the date and the time on it. And he says, "Oh, March 8th, it's my mom's birthday." And gave a little kiss to her in heaven, and then continued with his story. And we talked a little bit more, but eventually I finally got that shower and went to bed. The next morning, I woke up without an alarm. Is there anything better? And I was stretching the stiffness from my body. And when I opened my eyes and I looked out the window, there was snow on the ground. And I wasn't in Arizona. I was here in Vermont. I was dreaming. And I mean, that makes sense. I dream a lot, and my grandpa also died when I was in middle school. But there was a particular feeling that I had both in the dream, and it lingered when I woke up. And this happens to me often. I've learned to pay attention to those feelings. And so I grabbed my phone and I texted my mom and said, "Hey, do you know when Grandpa's mom was born?" Went about my day, and a couple hours later, she texted me back. She said, yeah, I did the genealogy a few years ago, and your great grandma was born on March 8th, 1892. I got goosebumps over my whole body. I had tears of joy in my eyes, and I just was absolutely ecstatic, just mind blown. And it was needed. It was like diving into the cold water on the first warm day of spring. It cleansed me, and it washed away some of the grief that I've been carrying. I know for me, but I'm sure also for many of you, this past year has held a lot of loss and a lot of grief. For me personally, it involved losing my father, as well as my aunt, who was the most firecracker of all of the Italian members of my family. And I miss them so much. And I also feel this sense of regret, just a little, that I didn't pay more attention, and that I didn't really pay attention to those stories that they had to share, that I've missed out. But this message, this dream that my grandpa shared with me, it reminded me that I can still gather those stories and wisdoms from my old Italian family, even after they're gone. Thank you.
Rachel, I've heard that story 3 times now, and I get chills. I've gotten chills each time you've told it. It's that's great. I love that. I love the dream scenario. I neglected to mention to all of you, we got a note saying that people couldn't open their Google form or respond or fill in the blanks. And I had put a hold on that so that people couldn't, stuff the ballots before the show, before the slam. So it is ready, thanks to the person who let us know that. Appreciate it. All right, our next storyteller, and the last one before intermission, is Susan Loind, and she lives in Fayston. She is on a mission to mine mundane situations for humor and joy, and enjoys stand-up, improv, and storytelling. When asked the question, what is your favorite late night snack, she responded that she does all of her snacking during the day and prefers to read late at night. Please welcome Susan Loind.
On a cold but sunny early spring day in 1985, I embarked on a walkabout tour of Cornwall and Wales. I was studying abroad with romantic notions of following in Wordsworth's steps. I went to England to get away from mid-80s American conservatism. I was disappointed to learn that I'd be sharing a flat with a bunch of other Americans who wanted to spend all of their time together. I was determined to go my own way and set off on a journey of scenic self-discovery. We had a few days off from school, and I walked out the front door without telling anybody where I was going or when I'd be back. I pored over the complicated bus and train schedules and soon found myself lost in a small village along the coast of Cornwall. Being a novice hiker, I naturally overpacked, but I didn't care. I was gloriously alone, and I walked along this trail and didn't see another hiker for miles. As I walked along this gorgeous cliff trail, there were gates that separated the meadows from cliff access, and you would have to stand up on a stump and squeeze through these complicated locks. I went through one of these gates, and as I came through the other side, I was a little bit off balance, and I looked down and I saw this beautiful piece of granite shining in the sun. Curious, I bent down to pick it up, and the weight in my pack shifted. I toppled forward, stumbled a bit, and did a face plant. And when I landed, I realized that my head and upper body were hanging precariously over the edge of a cliff, some 400 feet above a jagged, rocky coastline below. I tried to roll over on my back, but my pack was too heavy and was threatening to finish off the job and propel me over the edge, down to the watery depths below. I tried to remove my pack. Couldn't do that either. Eventually, I rolled onto my side and I started clawing at the loose gravel to pull myself back up to the edge of the trail. And I sat there and I thought, oh my God, nobody knows where I am or when I'm going to be back. Some random fisherman could have found my body at the base of this cliff and not known who the hell I was or how I got there. So I sat there panting on the side of the trail, thinking about how lucky I was just to be alive, but not to be deterred. I picked up my maps and I headed on to Land's End. Visions of the Pirates of Penzance danced in my head. I mapped it all out, and as you might have guessed, I miscalculated. I missed Penzance by 10 miles and ended up literally at the end of the world, in a parking lot overlooking a cliff, nothing for miles and miles around. It was a dark, rainy Sunday night. I got off the bus, no street lights, nothing around for miles. The wind is coming down in sheets sideways, and the only light I can see about a half a mile away turns out to be a pub. So things were looking up. I go into the pub and I sit down, I order a beer, and I pull out my bus schedule. And I look again. And I walk up to the bartender and I say somewhat sheepishly, can you tell me when the next bus is? And he says, Tuesday. So I order another beer, fight back my tears, and go back to my table. Sometime later, I hear him call, last call. to the three of us, myself and a young man and woman who start finishing up their drink, packing up their stuff and getting ready to leave the bar. To my surprise, the woman approached my table and said, "Are you all right?" I must have looked as desperate as I felt. And I said, "No, I'm not all right. I misread the bus schedule. I have no idea what to do." And she offered me a ride. And I know what you're thinking, but yes, I took a ride from strangers. They were Australians on an extended holiday touring Cornwall and Wales, and they invited me to join them. And they were amazing. Jack shared my love of Pink Floyd and beer, and Charlotte was kind and generous of spirit. We went to bed and breakfasts where they served beans and sausage for every meal, and we did not understand a single word of our Welsh hosts, but we had the time of our lives. We stayed in youth hostels that had coin-operated showers, and you had to pay extra to get the hot water. We went to the Cardiff Castle, which was this fantastic Gothic castle built on Norman and Roman ruins. And then we went to Worm's Head, which was this really cool chain of islands that looked like a giant caterpillar. You could only go out to the island during low tide, or else you'd get stuck there. We went to museums and wine bars and dance clubs. We ate takeout. We stayed up late into the night. We went to pubs that sold hundreds of types of beer built in the 18th century. And we stayed up drinking and smoking and talking about culture and politics and music and singing. And somewhere on the outskirts of Cardiff at a red light, while Jack and I were singing, "Hey, teacher, leave those kids alone," at the top of our lungs, Charlotte leans around the corner of the front seat and says, "You do get that we're on our honeymoon, right?" Oh, shit. I had no idea. I grabbed my map, my train tables, my backpack, and got out of the car before the light changed. Ran down an unmarked alley straight to the train station, jumped on board to a train that I hoped would take me back to school and my next adventure. Thank you.
Oh, I've known Susan a long time, and she has an endless supply of stories. It's amazing the things, and that in that introduction where she says she minds mundane things for humor and for stories, it's so true. She can create a story out of nothing. It's amazing. Well, Jess, we're here at Intermission, and we got a few things to just remind people about. You're on mute, but you know it happens to the best of us.
You can hear me?
Okay, so first of all,
Oh,
I want to remind you right there in the link, Ruth Ann just put in the link to the form. Some people were having trouble finding it. So the link is right there in the chat. You can just click on that and it should open right there on your computer. And select your vote away as you wish. Also,
we have some good stories coming up still. So.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. You're only we're as they say, let's say 5/9 of the way done. So the donation link, I might have missed it. It went things went so fast. The donation link is going to be posted as well if it hasn't already. Yeah, there it is. And so remember, all donations are shared between Share MRV and Valley Players Theater. And there's going to be a talk back at the end of the show. So stick around. It's going to be interesting. Don't you think?
Yeah. Have a glass of wine with us. Ask some questions.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So we're going to take 5 minutes, go clear the dishes, grab yourself another drink, do what you need to do. Thanks, Ruth Ann, for keeping things rolling.
Check one, a West Edison. I take 22, better known as a deuce. Choose your route. Who's the group that moves you when you put on your headphones? So put on your headphones. Check one, a West Edison. I take 22, better known as a deuce. Choose your route. Who's the group that moves you when you put on your headphones? It bounce to the groove. 80 beats per minute, hopped up and running like Dennis Kucinich. Feeling strong like Popeye on spinach. I won't try to finish the stove rhyme. Spinning in my mind, walking a fine line. What you want, where you going, and where you been? Where have you been? Check one, West Edison. Take 22, better known as a deuce. Your route. Who's the group that moves you when you put on your headphones? So put on your headphones. Check one, West Edison. Take 22, better known as a deuce. Your route. Who's the group that moves you when you put on your headphones? So bounce to the groove. We're on iTunes, now you can get Bloom in your own room or live at Nectar's when we got a reason to start staying up late until the beat's done. Then you wake up in the AM and compose one. Don't stop until the sun's gone down behind the mountains. It's a wonderful life that you found, son. Check one, West Edison. Take 22, better known as a deuce. Choose your route. Who's the group that moves you when you put on your headphones? So put on your headphones. Check one, West Edison. Take 22, better known as a deuce. Choose your route. Who's the group that moves you when you put on your headphones? Now show me what you got, pretty mama. Show me what you got, pretty lady. Show me what you got, shorty. Show me what you got, baby. Hands up now, wave. Now wave. Now wave. Don't wave. Now wave. On the road again, close to home, come rolling in. Early to the show, do you remember friends? Or when they moved from 22? Good to be true, you do it cause you need this. A reason to believe, wish this all was up to me. You need to set your spirit free. At last just ask, where you coming from? Check one, West Edison. Take 22, better known as a deuce. Choose your route. Who's the group that moves you when you put on your headphones? So put on your headphones. Check one, West Edison. Take 22, better known as a deuce. Choose your route. Who's the group that moves you when you put on your headphones? Like a rocket with a minute to town now. You can't stop it with the wheel in my hand. As I stand on the floor of the boat with the car on the road. So woman in the backseat, she my wife, she in the middle of delivery. Man, she saved me to this day, I don't know why. She picked me up when I was down by the side of the road. Oh, well, the sun's gonna rise in a mile. In a mile, you'll be feeling fine. In a mile, you will see after me. You'll be out of the dark, you're gonna get your shot. The sun's gonna rise in a mile. In a mile, you'll be feeling fine. In a mile, you will see after me. You'll be out of the dark, you're gonna get your shot. Yeah, check one, West Edison. I take 22. Better known as a deuce. Choose your route. Who's the group that moves you when you put on your headphones and bounce to the groove?
Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. All right, here we go. Hope you had a nice glass of wine or a beer. To start the show again, we have Warren's Justice of the Peace, Susan Bachner. Hi, Susan. Okay, anyone out there looking for a wedding officiant? Susan tells us that she's having the time of her life. She's been skiing, swimming, practicing yoga, writing poetry, and performing on stage. Her favorite late night snack is granola with almond milk topped with extra craisins and pecans. Take it away, Susan.
Have you met my granddaughter, Sophie? She's a master's degree candidate in English literature at New Paltz, SUNY New Paltz, and she teaches an introductory class to writing and composition. Oh, wait, this story's about me, her grandma, and the surprises that she's brought to my life. Let's go back 10 years. I'm visiting my family in Ithaca, New York. At 8 o'clock at night, we're sitting in the living room, and suddenly my daughter-in-law says to my son, "Did you see what Adrian posted on Facebook?" My son looks down and goes, "Wow." Well, I didn't have Facebook open and said, "Well, what did he post?" "That he's gay." Well, being the loving parents and grandparent that we are, we ran up the stairs and we hugged and cuddled Adrian. I have to tell you, I wasn't that surprised, but I did send up a prayer that the world should be kind to this child. Amen. Let's fast forward now to May 2015, and I'm once again visiting the family in Ithaca, New York. It's late afternoon, I'm sitting at the kitchen table. I hear some conversation in the living room, and then Adrian comes into the kitchen and says, "Grandma, I want to tell you something. I'm a girl." Wow, gay was easy. I found this announcement a little bit confusing and unsettling. Now, of course, I gave my grandchild a big hug and I said, "I love you so much." You know, I'd heard about transgender people, but like I never really knew anyone, not up close, anybody I knew. Well, a little while later, my daughter-in-law sent me a book about transitioning, which was very helpful to me, and I learned a lot. And one of the things was the concept of cisgender, C-I-S gender. Well, that's me. It's someone who's born where their body matches their gender identity. I'd never thought about anything like that. And the book talked about hormones and talked about surgery. Soon, Adrian let us know that she would now be called Sophie. I have to tell you, at that moment, I kind of felt a loss. I mean, I had this grandson I was losing who I loved so much. Of course, I told myself it's the same person, but you know, it did feel like a loss for a while. And the hardest thing in the beginning are the pronouns, remembering to call her she and her. I have to tell you, I did make some mistakes in the beginning, and I know that was hurtful for Sophie, but eventually it became second nature. That summer, Sophie worked as an intern at the Planned Parenthood in Ithaca, and she wrote a pamphlet about how to talk to people who are transitioning. And the thing I learned most there is that, you know, you don't ask about surgery. That's a bit personal. I was wondering what the next steps would be for Sophie in this journey. First, there were visits to the psychotherapist. Next was the pediatric endocrinologist. That was to talk about hormone therapy. And I have to tell you, it was worrisome for me. You see, both my daughter and my husband's sister have the BRCA gene, which means a propensity for breast and other cancers. And so they needed to do this test to be sure Sophie could do hormone therapy. And well, we were all relieved that that test was negative. I have to tell you, at some point I wondered, how does a 16-year-old know she's a girl, and might she change her mind? There were so many questions that I had. Well, the summer after Sophie's first year at SUNY New Paltz, she and her parents flew out to California. They had found a doctor to do the long-awaited gender realignment surgery. Because the family kept me connected throughout the process, I felt I understood what was going on. And the very next day, I got to talk to Sophie with WhatsApp. And most of all, I was so happy to see her surrounded by her supportive and loving parents. Sophie and I are so close. I love that young woman, and I've learned so much from her. I have to tell you, other than looking at old family pictures, I don't even think that she was once my grandson, Adrian. I mean, that's just history now. Did I tell you, Sophie's now a master's degree candidate. She teaches. Have you met my granddaughter, Sophie? If not, I hope you have a chance one day. Thank you.
I love that story, Susan. It is really, it makes you feel good about humanity. So thanks for sharing that with us. Okay, next storyteller, Wes Olds, hails from Montpelier. He's the next on our list. He spent the pandemic perfecting the art of belting out 80s songs while doing the dishes. He claims his cat usually tolerates the singing. Wes can be found in the kitchen late at night munching on a bowl of grape nuts with milk poured over it, or sometimes whiskey, but never whiskey poured over the grape nuts. Wes, I'm with you.
Is there anything in your life that you love to do, but you have absolutely no talent for? For me, that's baseball. I love baseball. Problem is, I'm not very good at it. But when I was a kid, I played Little League. And for 4 years, I was lucky enough to be on the town's championship winning team. For 4 years, I went home every year with a first place trophy. And I hated those trophies because I knew, and everybody on the team knew, that I didn't do a damn thing to help the team earn those trophies. I was that useless kid on the team that probably did more harm than good. Nobody wanted me on the team. To be honest, even the coach didn't want me on the team. He was just nice enough not to say it to my face. I mean, I was so bad that during those 4 years on that team, I didn't get one single hit at bat. I was so bad that one game I had to leave the game early with a bloody nose because a teammate passed the ball to me, and I saw it coming. I just didn't think to put my glove up to catch it. Instead, I just watched it come towards my face until it actually hit me in the face. When we got the bleeding to stop, I begged the coach to let me go back in the game. Let me go back in, I just want to play, I'm fine. But coach said no. For the next week or so, I begged my parents, let me go back to play, I'm fine, I'm fine. They said, no, your face is still swollen. So when it did come time for me to rejoin the team, I was so excited. And that first game back, the first 3 innings, I sat on the bench, which was not too unusual. Top of the 4th inning comes, we're down by 2 runs, and the coach puts me in the game. Not because I'm his star player and he needs me to save the game, but because the league had a rule that every kid had to play at least 3 innings of each game, you know, for the bad kids like me. And he put me at third base, which was really unusual and confusing because I'd only played third base a handful of times and I was never taught how to play third base. I didn't know what I was doing there. But nonetheless, he put me at third base. So I'm standing there a few feet away from third base, trying to look intimidating, but mentally having no idea what the hell is going on around me. And the inning isn't going well for us. Before we know it, bases are loaded, there's no outs, down by 2 runs, and the other team's strongest hitter is at the plate. Now the runner from third is taking a huge lead off third because he knows that the pitcher isn't going to throw the ball to me to try to tag him out, because it's not just my own teammates that know I'm useless. The entire league knows that I'm useless. That runner doesn't need to worry about me. So he takes a huge lead. The pitch comes, I see the bat swing, I hear the clang of the metal bat against the baseball, and the baseball comes flying right towards me because that really strong hitter just hit a really strong line drive straight towards me. Now, remember that last game with the bloody nose? I told the coach, I'm fine, let me play. And I'd been telling my parents for a week, I'm fine, just let me play. Well, I wasn't fine. I was lying to everybody. I wanted to play, but I wasn't fine. A baseball had hit me in the nose, and now I'm terrified of baseballs. And here's one coming at me really, really fast, really, really hard. And so I did what any 11-year-old boy would do in this situation. I dove to the ground and covered my head. And as I did so, I turned behind me towards left field to see what would happen next. And I saw who was playing out in left field that night. It was the new kid on the team. And amazingly, he was even worse at baseball than I was. I knew he wasn't going to get the ball. I knew this because he was bad and because I saw that he wasn't paying attention. He was looking at his feet, kicking the dirt on the ground. I knew by the time he finally did get to the ball, chances are it would be too late. All 4 runners would probably score. We'd be down by 6 runs. There's no way we're coming back from this. We're going to lose the game because I'm scared and dove to the ground. I couldn't do that to the team again. But I also couldn't stand up and face the ball because I was afraid of the ball. But I couldn't let the team down again. So still crouched down on the ground, I shut my eyes as tight as I could and shot my left hand up as high as I could while still being crouched on the ground. And next thing I know, I'm lying flat on my back. And I look in my glove, and there's the ball. By some twist of fate, the ball had flown right into my glove and hit me so hard it literally knocked me over onto my back and wedged itself between the webbing and the fingers of the glove. It was stuck there. I had caught the ball, or the ball caught me. But either way, I had the ball. The batter was out. I got up. I was so excited. I caught the ball. And then I didn't know what to do because I'd never been taught how to play third base. So I was about to toss the ball back to the pitcher because I did know that's what you do at the end of the play, when I hear the third base coach from the other team yell, "Get back to third, he caught the ball." That third base runner who didn't pay me any attention and took that huge lead was now almost to home plate, and he had to get back to third before I did. So I took 3 steps to the right, stepped on third, he's out, 2 outs. And then the next part's a little fuzzy in my memory. I honestly have no idea how I did this, but somehow I tagged out the runner going from second to third. I made 3 outs all by myself, an unassisted triple play. I went back to the bench. I was so excited, and I got high fives from everybody on the team, and that had never happened in those 4 years on that team. I sat down on the bench with the biggest grin on my face. Coach comes over to me, kneels down in front of me, hands me the ball, and says, "Keep this." And I was a little confused. I didn't know why he was giving me the ball because the inning was over. On the way home from the game that night, my dad explained to me that when a coach gives you a game ball and tells you to keep it, that means the coach saw something out in the field extraordinary and amazing, and that I earned a special recognition of being able to keep the game ball. Those 4 first place trophies I got ended up in storage boxes and forgotten and eventually thrown away. But this old baseball that's faded and starting to crack, this baseball has never been lost and never been forgotten, and it will never be thrown away.
Oh, thank you, Wes. Oh man, I almost forgot I was hosting because I was so in that story. I could see him like crouching down and putting up his hand, and that was great. Thank you, thank you. Okay, so up next is our storyteller, Hannah Mackey. Hannah is a bit of a gypsy. She currently resides in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. When not in the ocean or lying in the sunlight, they can be found drawing or forcing friends to cook dumplings with them. Their favorite late night snack is putting away a whole damn bar of Tony's chocolonely, which I don't know what that is. So anyways, come on out, Hannah.
I have spent a large portion of the last year or so of lockdown just sitting alone in my apartment trying to process the chaos unfolding around me. And faced with anxiety and confusion about the future, I found myself reminiscing quite a bit. And I recently stumbled across some hospital records from my college semester abroad in Nepal. I arrived in Nepal just 4 days before my 21st birthday, and I was prepped and ready for anything. I had my camera, my hiking gear, a Tibetan pocket dictionary, and of course, the fearlessness of a college-age kid. I was excited for new experiences, and I was ready for an adventure. And after just 1 week, I had sweat through every article of clothing that I owned. I had eaten at least 100 dumplings. I'd filled my lungs with incense and my belly with milk tea, and I'd fallen madly in love with the neighborhood that I was staying in called Boda. On day 8, though, I found myself sitting in a clinic with an IV in my hand. I had gone in earlier that day feeling really sick, but assuming it was just a bout of traveler's diarrhea, which of course was something that every foreign traveler to Nepal experienced. But there I was, sitting in these fancy hospital PJs, surrounded by doctors that I couldn't understand, with like 3% phone battery, just really scared. I had appendicitis. And I had planned for surprises, but this was not supposed to happen. Surgery was not a planned part of my adventure. And I guess it wasn't part of my doctor's plan either. See, Dr. Bashyal, who was a small, round-faced man with a smile so cheesy it could have landed him a role in a cartoon. He had decided to treat my appendicitis with antibiotics, so he decided to keep it in my body. And I was not particularly convinced by this plan, but I was a trooper. So I decided to just grit my teeth and take seriously the advice that my friend sent to me, albeit something he said sarcastically. He told me, "It's like Peter Pan or the Easter Bunny. You've just got to believe." And so with the hopes that the whole ordeal would dissipate, I manifested a normal size, less dramatic appendix. Needless to say, it did not work. And a few days later, I was taken to the hospital in the back of an ambulance that I assure you was just a station wagon for the appendectomy. I remember waking up tucked tightly into a scratchy hospital blanket in a full-blown hysteria. I was crying uncontrollably. And this nurse noticed whatever seemed to be happening to me, walked over and leaned over me, and I can picture her face just above mine. She stopped and just yelled, "Stop crying!" At least I think she did. She could have said absolutely anything in literally any language, and in that tone, it would have gotten me to shut up immediately. And the next time I opened my eyes, the surgeon himself was shaking me on the shoulder. He waited for my eyes to open, focus, and then he held up in front of me a specimen cup with my appendix in it. It was small, about the size of my pinky finger. It was shriveled up. It looked like a chewed up piece of gum. It was disgusting, but he was grinning ear to ear, just like waiting for me to approve his handiwork. And the whole debacle continued to unfold when 1 week later, I returned to the clinic to have my staples removed. The nurse actually used the staple removing tool upside down, and she securely lodged one of the staples even further into my wound. After hours of pain so acute that my fingernails literally ripped into the side of the vinyl exam table that I was laying on, I went home and returned for them to try again the next day. It took 3 doctors to remove that staple, but by some miracle, it came out and just in time for me to hop into a taxi and head directly for the airport to board a plane for a remote Himalayan village with the rest of my student cohort. I spent the next 3 weeks applying antibiotic ointment and gauze by headlamp. I got my adventure. I got to hike through the Himalayas with the help of a horse when I could no longer hold myself up. I learned how to balance over a squat toilet without the use of my abs. I even contracted Giardia, or intestinal parasites. Those next 4 months were my greatest adventure, chaos included. And so now, in 2021, sitting on the floor of my apartment, flipping through these hospital records, I am terrified of the present and the future, but I'm reminded of how resilient and adaptable we really are. And so I find myself not just blindly wishing that this would all go away, but instead hoping that someday I'll be able to see that this past year, this trauma, all of these experiences We're all part of what will be a magnificent adventure. And so I think back to what my friend said. It's like Peter Pan or the Easter Bunny. You've just got to believe.
Hannah. Everyone's got to remember those stories, those of us who are older than post college. Hi, Willie. How you doing?
Good.
How about if I introduce you? Is that okay?
Sounds good.
Our final, last but not least, as they say, storyteller, Willie Desmond. Willie is new to the Mad River Valley. Welcome. Having recently arrived from Arizona with his wife, Sarah, 2-year-old son, Yum Yum, and dog, Lambeau. When asked for his favorite late night snack, he answered, bourbon. Oh, I'm with you, man. I'm with you. Okay, Willie, here you go.
When I was in high school, I saved my best friend John's life. Now, it all started out like any other night. I was headed to work. It was probably the best job I'll ever have. I was delivering pizza for a local restaurant. I didn't really have a uniform. I didn't really have a boss. I made great money, and I had super flexible hours. Mostly what I did was listen to music, drive around in my 91 Toyota Previa, nicknamed the Egg, due to its round shape and white color. And occasionally, I would bring some of my friends free food. So I was headed to work, and my friend John called me and said, hey, man, can you bring me a pizza? And I go, no, I cannot. It's going to be busy, and that's not happening. And he goes, half cheese, half tomato. And I go, got it, but that's absolutely not happening. And hung up. But when I got to the restaurant, I told the chef, hey, man, can you make me a pizza, half cheese, half tomato? And, just as a joke, can you make it in the shape of a heart? And I didn't think too much of it. But then John started calling me, like every 15 minutes, being like, hey, are you going to bring me a pizza? And I was like, no, I'm not bringing you a pizza. First of all, I learned early on, it's better to over-deliver and under-promise. Also, free pizza is always trumped by surprise free pizza. So I was absolutely not going to tell him I was bringing pizza. But he kept calling. And every time he called, that pizza just sat 15 minutes longer on the warming shelf. And we had a pretty busy night, so I wasn't really in the mood to bring him pizza anyway, as opposed to taking an order that could bring me a tip. But eventually, there was an order going to his neighborhood, and so I put the pizza in the bottom of my bag, and I headed over there. And as I'm pulling up to John's house, just picture his family like the typical nuclear American family. He's got his mom and his dad and his older sister, and they live in this perfect little house with this perfect little yard. And I pull up to the house and park my car and start walking up the driveway, and John's dad's outside because he's maintaining the perfect yard, the perfect lawn, the flagpole outside, everything. He goes, hey, Willie, what are you doing here? And I go, oh, I'm just bringing John a pizza. And he immediately changes his tone, starts going, we'll see about that, starts calling him a muckety-muck, but I don't think too much of it. John and his dad have been sparring a lot the last couple of years, owed mostly to the fact that John's got a personality at this point that's a combination Eddie Haskell with a Napoleon complex and a whole bunch of puberty mixed in. So him and his dad are never really seeing eye to eye. So I just kind of keep headed towards the front door. And when I get to the front door, their family is the type of family, and he's the type of friend where I don't really knock. I just kind of walk right in. So I walk in the front door, and when you get inside, there's this tiny little landing where you kind of have the whole house laid in front of you. You can go upstairs to all the bedrooms. You can go off to the right where the family all watches TV and sits on the couch. You can go straight ahead to the kitchen, or you can go to the left to the fancy room where you don't go in, and you certainly don't go in while you're wearing your shoes. So I poke my head in over to the TV and see John's sister there. And I go, hey, Erin, what's going on? And she goes, what are you doing here? And I go, oh, John wanted pizza. And she goes, he did what? And so she gets up and she starts walking towards me. And this is when I realized that Mr. Adovic has now boxed me in from behind. And I've got John's sister to my right and John's dad behind me. And all of a sudden, John's mom appears in front of me. And she goes, Willie, what are you doing here? And I go, oh, John wanted pizza. And she just starts sobbing. And she starts walking towards me. And a second later, I've got the entire family around me. And then John shows up at the top of the stairs. And I look up at John, and his face changes from pizza to, oh my God, they're going to kill me. And I don't know what's going on. And that's when John's mom says, how could you on my birthday? And his dad and sister start talking about what they're going to do to him. And his mom's got tears streaming down. I go, no, wait, Mrs. Adamek. It's a special pizza for you. And I open the box like it's a diamond necklace in a jewelry store commercial. And sitting there perfectly is a heart-shaped pizza. And she goes, half cheese, half tomato, my favorite. And a second later, the family's got the camera out. And we're all taking pictures with the pizza. And they're all talking about how great of a surprise it is. And I look up at John, and just as fast as his face turned from pizza to they're going to kill me, it changed from they're going to kill me to how did you do that? And that's the night I saved my best friend John's life.
I think we should have everyone come out and take a bow.
I think we should too. Those are great stories, you
All
guys.
right, come on out, everyone. Give us a wave.